Well, good morning, everyone. This is Cindy, and this is the next of my series on special issues in education class, my UCLA class, and I've been interviewing subject matter experts throughout the country on different topics that we talk about. And today I have with me Amy Goldin. She is the owner and the consultant with College Options in the Performing Arts. And Amy is coming to us from Long Island. Thank you for being with us today, Amy.
My pleasure.
Hopefully I got your consulting name right.
Yes, it's correct.
All right. And so what we want to start off with is we want to hear a little bit about your background and how you got into counseling. Our students are all
Mhm.
coming from lots of different areas. We have high school high school counselors. We have people who work in nonprofit groups. We have independents. We have people who are, this is a, second career. So it's a broad range of things. So they're always interested in knowing how people come into this profession.
Right. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that people are entering second careers. I think for me, this is probably a third or fourth career, and some of them are concurrent with each other. So it's not like I closed the door on one and then moved to another. I started life as a child performer when I was at age 4, and it's been a lot of music and performing my entire life since then. I have 2 degrees in music education. I spent 35 years in various areas of teaching music, privately, in public schools, private schools. I wear a lot of hats as a music teacher. I wasn't the teacher who stayed in one school for a 35-year term and then went and retired. So I'm still teaching. I'm not in the classroom as much anymore, but I've branched out into different things. So as I said, I have my degrees in music education, and of course, like a lot of other music teachers, I have always given private lessons. And what happened was, over the years, I would be chatting with my students as they were taking their coats off, ready to start their piano or voice lessons. And for my high school students, the question always kind of came up from me, gee, are you thinking about college? And we're talking about decades of asking that question and decades of getting the response from students. Well, my school guidance counselor, she's really nice, but she doesn't really know much about music or acting or film or dance, and she didn't really know where to send me, but she said that Juilliard is a good school. And so I had a lot of students thinking that they were looking at Juilliard, and it started occurring to me that there were other programs for them to look at. So in the days BC, before computers, I would write to colleges all over the country and request them to send me their catalogs, which in today's terms would be their websites, but there were no websites. So I would collect bookshelves filled with catalogs and loan them out to my students and say, here, take a look at this school. It's called Oberlin. Take a look at this school. It's called Carnegie Mellon. Take a look. And then they would come back with all these questions for me. And of course, all of my students tended to be performers. Nobody takes voice lessons just for the fun of singing. Everybody's taking voice lessons because they want to get the lead role in their high school show. So they would ask me questions, and I would try to answer those questions. And some answers I had, and some I didn't, just like today. And eventually, I got really interested in this whole idea of how these children were choosing colleges, and were they choosing the right ones, and what were the factors that were going into it, and all the things that we all talk about now in this profession. And in the meantime, I also started to have a much wider base of students coming to me, including students who were heading to Broadway, or of course trying to get to Broadway or make it in the film industry or dance or something like that. And I had a lot of students looking into a lot of different areas of the performing arts. Plus, I started having my own family, and my middle son actually decided to do some professional acting. He was fairly successful, and my whole world opened up to another clientele, so to speak, of professional actors, kids, adults. So I got another vantage point. Now it wasn't just me being the singer, the performer, the conductor, the composer. It wasn't just me teaching singers, performers, conductors, composers. It wasn't just me being we have a process here in New York State of judging our high school students for our all-state ensembles, which I know a lot of states have all-state ensembles. I was a judge for that. But now suddenly I was a parent watching my own child going through that professional acting process and trying not to be a stage mother. And along the way, I had also done a lot of writing, and I've written consistently since my undergraduate days for our school music news journal, which is our New York State journal for music educators. So I had a lot of information and experiences that I was bringing to the table. And eventually my own kids started going to college, and it was just at the beginning of the internet availability of college information and getting away from the catalogs and into the websites. And I was captivated by the entire process. I started keeping the Fisk guide in my car for recreational reading. And by the time my third child went to college and went through the process, and that book was still in my car even after he was accepted, I said, I think I would like to do this for more people. I have no more children of my own to do it for. I still have all of my students. I'd like to be more experienced. I'd like to be more knowledgeable about the entire process. And I started looking around for a master's, thinking that I would get, I didn't really need another master's degree, but all right, let me see if I can find a master's in college counseling. And there were no master's degrees in college counseling.
Right.
And voila, I don't mean this to be a commercial for the UCLA program, but voila, I found the UCLA program, the certificate program, and it was just perfect. And I felt like that really put me over from being a professional musician and a professional teacher into the profession of college counseling. And I think I secretly have always wanted to be a guidance counselor anyway. So that was kind of how I got to this entire process. And I do have to say that the UCLA certificate was a phenomenal jumping off point for me and source of information. So that's basically how I got to this. I didn't mean to use up all of this time, but I come at this from many different sides with a lot of experiences in my own life. And I feel like doing this right now is kind of a synthesis of everything that I've done in the past. And I'm able to call on it. You know how the expression, you always use what you learn. Mm-hmm. I feel like I really am using what I've learned over the years. And of course, I'm always learning more. And that's really the fun part of this, is that you're always learning every year. Different.
That's so fabulous. And I think our class members will really appreciate knowing that you have come through the UCLA, the value that you found with it, and how you've used that to build and grow and proceed from there, and yet how your past experiences really contribute to that. And I think that's a really important thing to recognize.
Well, it is the old story of do what you know, write what you know. We tell this to our students all the time. Don't, be authentic to yourself, write what you know, do what you know. And I felt like that was really what I was doing when I was going in for the UCLA program. I wasn't planning to do a performing arts focal point to my work, but it seemed like the most natural thing in the world. It was like a light bulb went off over my head. And I said, oh, duh, this is what I know. And there are so many students out there who need this. And to kind of segue into the process itself, the performing arts application process on all levels of performing arts is so much more involved than just if you want to be, a bio major.
Right.
When I have students who are not performing arts students, it's like being on vacation compared to what my performing arts kids have to go through.
So that leads us into our next question. So as an advisor, when a student walks into your office and says, I want to study musical theater, or I want to study dance, or whatever the performing arts is, what questions should an advisor ask them? That's a pretty broad question.
Students come to that decision or that conclusion about themselves from many different directions. And some of them are super serious. They've been studying since they're 3 years old. They've been playing the violin, or others have had their lead roles in the musical theater. They've had their leads in high school. And as soon as they get off stage, everybody crowds around them and says, you should be on Broadway. And they get the lead every year in their high school production. And every year it gets hammered in deeper and deeper. You should be on Broadway. I think it's important for us as advisors to start the dialogue with the student so that but more importantly, so that the student can try to determine what it is about that decision or that conclusion that draws the student to it, and what that student envisions beyond the 4 years of college, of undergraduate school. And I think students in the performing arts, kind of like medical students or athletes, need to look beyond just what those next 4 years will be like, and where those 4 years are likely to take them. Everything about the performing arts requires time. It's like building muscles. It's like, trying to exercise. You can't just cram it into one weekend of 6 hours a day of lifting weights and expect to be buff on Monday morning. Everything about the performing arts, studying and doing, requires consistent study, consistent practice, effort, preparation. And in the performing arts, as everyone knows, the end result after all of that does not necessarily lead to success. It usually leads to a life filled with uncertainty, possibly for a person's entire career. So kids don't necessarily understand it from that perspective. And I think that we walk a fine line between laying down the stark realities of a performing arts career and also not bursting the student's bubble and bringing them down. So I ask questions that hopefully start to bring some clarity and some reality to the student, beyond what the parents have already probably said, which is, oh my God, how are you going to pay your rent? So we need the student to understand why. Why do you want to study opera? Why do you want to study musical theater? Why do you want to be a filmmaker? And so I ask the student, if I don't already know, and I'm directing this also to school counselors who might know even less. I mean, I'll sit with a student for 2 hours and get the full flavor of what this kid's been doing for the past 10 years of their 16-year-old life. But a school counselor might not know what a student does outside of school, what kinds of lessons they're taking in training. So I will ask a student to tell me about your experiences in the performing arts, musical theater, opera, whatever, in school, outside of school, professionally for some students. I would like to know because I want to know, but again, because I want them to focus in on, gee, how much training have I really had? If I want to go to musical theater, am I a triple threat? Do I have singing, dancing, acting? And, especially in musical theater, it's not an all or nothing. There are plenty of students who go in and study musical theater who are stronger in one area than the other. When people are looking for jobs, sometimes they will usually see a call for a role that will say an actor who sings well or a singer who moves well, which is different from a singer who dances. So not every role needs a triple threat. Of course, the more triple threat you are, the more marketable you are. But just because you don't have 10 years of dance training, that doesn't mean you're out of the running. However, you need to see the realities of it. So I need to know, and I need the student to pay attention to their own training, if the training's been formal or if they've been self-taught, what kinds of performances you like. I see more and more actors, kids who want to become professional actors, who say they want to be professional actors, but they don't want to have anything to do with Shakespeare. They don't like Shakespeare. So that's a particular kind of acting that they better not go to a school where Shakespeare is part of their audition requirement. They're not going to show very well in that particular environment. I'd like students to understand what it is that's so appealing and satisfying to them. And I often wonder if students are just trying to run away from the stuff that's difficult because their performing is so easy and so gratifying, and it's harder than math, and it's harder than science. But just because something is easy to do and fun, does that mean it should be your career? Does that mean it should be what you study for 4 years in school? And I also like to ask them, do you know what it's like to have a career in that thing that you're going to study for 4 years? And do you want to study only that? Do you want to be musical theater, 24/7, all musical theater all the time? Sometimes when you think about it, that doesn't sound so appealing. And, how are you going to feel if you get an ensemble part? You've had the lead for 4 years. What if your next thing is that you're in the chorus? How are you going to feel about that? Is that an affront to your ego? Better get rid of that, because you usually start in the chorus in the professional world. And is there anything else you'd like to do for these 4 formative years of your life? Is there anything else that's ever captivated you that you might like to study? Because this is the time that you get to do it. And after those first 4 years, life is different. So I need kids to understand that. That's usually more than one conversation, by the way. That's several conversations. Definitely.
Yeah. Well, and I think, and we started in the very first week of our class, we started with a TED Talk that talks about the why and getting to the why. And that's, everybody's reiterating, we always look at that. Why do you want to do a sport? Why do you want to be a performer? And what's the reasons? And this whole process is that self-reflection and that journey to learn more, because a lot of times they don't know those questions and they don't know the answers until you as a counselor start asking, and it gives them an opportunity to really start reflecting on that.
Right. And I also think that counselors, whether school or independent, I think we are a very good buffer between that parental and child dynamic that often has a lot of friction and tension attached to it. And I think it's really good for us to become sort of the neutral place where both parents and students can come and vent a little bit and maybe see some calm and some balance
Mm-hmm.
to what could become a pretty fiery experience. I don't have a lot of parents that I've heard of who, when their child says they want to study computer engineering, the parents go, "Oh no, not that." Um, so they perhaps need a little less buffering than the performing arts kids do.
That's very true. Very true. So, in terms of that and working with these students, you mentioned how the application process is a lot more involved for performing
Mhm.
arts. What difference does it make to apply to an audition-based program versus a non-audition-based program?
Well, of course, the audition-based program is going to require the preparation of the audition, and that in and of itself is very, again, time-consuming. It can also be financially an issue
Mm-hmm.
and is something that students who don't have years and years of training or don't have access to even training just for the audition because of they don't have financial access, they could be, on the low side of the situation because we have kids who've been getting trained high level training for years and years. And of course, there's this, that there's a class issue just in that situation right there. The audition based program means that very often your admission to that program rests either exclusively or in a very large percentage on that 5 or 10 minute audition that you've spent 6 months preparing for, and a lot of money possibly. I'm working with a student now. The family lost a big part of their house in Hurricane Sandy. Lived there on
Oh.
Long Island.
Mm-hmm.
They had all of that. She was living with a friend for 6 weeks, and they don't have a lot of money to start with. And she's preparing right now for these auditions for her musical theater program. And I've actually put her on what I call scholarship with me, and I'm not charging her for my lessons because I know she has to pay an accompanist to prepare her for the auditions. So she is applying largely to schools where her audition is going to be everything in terms of getting in. A non-audition based program is usually for a BA program. So a BA means that you're going to have a lot more flexibility and room in your curriculum for other studies or for deeper studies in what you're choosing. The audition-based program being more of a multi-level of application process. So you may have some audition-based programs that require a pre-screen first, which means you've got to record your audition pieces and submit the audition pieces and hope you get called to the next level, which would be a live audition. So then we have, again, a financial factor. I'm not even talking about the artistic yet, but just the financial factor of physically getting to the auditions. You and I are talking this weekend. Right now, this past weekend, we've had the unified auditions in New York City, which is a mass audition process, which you may know, your students may not know. A mass audition process. There's one held in New York City, one in LA, and one in Chicago. And thousands of students gather in one location and go from basically hotel room to hotel room to hotel room, where different schools have set up the process for them to come and audition school by school by school by school. And so that means that I've got a student who came out here from Northern California, and she's spending 2 weeks in New York doing all these auditions, taking classes with coaches here in New York, seeing other auditioners who have kind of dovetailed onto the unified process. She's got the financial wherewithal to do that. My student who lost part of her house in Sandy can't even begin to do something like that if it's not here in New York City, because she can't travel all over the country to go to auditions. So just the application process, the pre-screening, having to do sometimes several other additional applications, not just supplements,
Right.
but supplements to the supplements to the supplements, and putting together a specific and arts-based resume, putting together a repertoire list. This is the one that gets a lot of students. What do you mean a repertoire list? And I said this to one of the parents. She said, you mean he's got to write down every piece of music he's ever studied? I said, no, only just for the past 4 years. And she was kind of, how do I begin? I don't know what to put down. Should I put down all the pieces he ever played in band? And we had to work through all of his work to get what is considered a repertoire list. So students often don't know this until they actually open up the application in their senior year and start doing the application. And they say, what? I have to do this? I have to gather all that information? There's just so much more to it that they didn't know about ahead of time. Of course, my students know about it as soon as they start working with me. Let's get your repertoire list started. But many students don't. And even their teachers, you think their teachers would know, and even their private teachers either don't know it or it doesn't occur to them to mention it. So there's a lot that they don't find out until kind of the 11th hour about that audition-based process. And of course, when you're in an audition-based program, you're surrounded by a level of students who have also competed and have been at that ability to compete. When you go to a non-audition-based program, sort of anybody can get in who might like to sing or dance or play, and the top students tend to rise. The better students tend to rise to the top. They get more solos, they get more performance opportunities. But you also tend to be in a more diverse population around you of students. And sometimes you just don't want to talk arts all the time. Sometimes you just want to watch a football game.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's very, very true. Very true. And you bring up some other really good points, and that, there's so much to this. And it's like being an athlete or some of these other things. If I have a student come in and tells me I want to go play on Broadway, I know that's not my area of expertise. I can guide them through certain basics and things of that nature, but I might need to call on a professional such as yourself to really help or refer that student. So how do people get a hold of you, Amy?
I have a website, which is www.performingartsoptions.com. I can give you my phone number, which is area code 516-674-6116. So, of course, an email or a phone call would be great. And I do that sort of thing that you were just talking about. I do become a person who evaluates the areas that I feel qualified to evaluate. I also suggest that people contact local colleges that you may be near and make an appointment. A lot of professors will be happy to listen to a junior, sometimes even a sophomore, and say, yeah, you're on a good track, or you think you better get some more voice lessons, or you're going to have to practice a little more if you're going to be viable for a college program. So, professors will do that. Some will charge, some will not. Mm-hmm. The conservatory professors tend to charge for their lesson time. And some people will, it's part of their, I guess, marketing, recruiting for their schools. So it's very uneven. I would just like to say that the entire process is very uneven. We really don't have a lot of standards from school to school in terms of even what is being asked in the audition process. And how it all works. Just the one thing I would like everyone to know is that they must investigate school by school the processes for the auditions, the requirements for the auditions, and check the websites beyond the applications to see if there are more applications that have to be filled out for that program.
And that is very sage advice, because there's nothing like thinking you're done and then discovering, oh my gosh, there's just this whole much more process, and
exactly.
have certain deadlines that are different and all these different things.
Mm-hmm.
So Amy, thank you very much for your time today, and we look forward to other information. And I would encourage people to check out your website and contact you if they have questions. I've always found you to be such a giving and wonderful resource. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Cindy. It's a pleasure, and thank you for asking me to do this today.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Bye-bye.